Sawadee-ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in Volume 5, chapters 21 through 30. This Volume 5 is titled The First Stage of Enlightenment, Stream Enter. This is a collection of teachings that are needed in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And getting to that first stage of enlightenment is really important because there's various qualities and benefits of getting to that first stage of enlightenment. You're going to be learning about some of those today. So we've got a whole series of discourses throughout this book that are a collection of discourses that a student who is making their way to the first stage of enlightenment and actually in the first stage of enlightenment would deeply understand and would deeply be practicing. And of course, there's various foundational teachings from Volume 1 through Volume 4 that a student would need to have learned before moving into Volume 5. So this Pali Canon English study group, we're going to be doing this in a way where there's students who are in Zoom who are invited to volunteer to read a particular chapter. Then as you guys do that, I will offer some teachings on that to help you guys to more deeply understand how to integrate these into your day-to-day practice. And the teachings of the Buddha are very clear, very concise, and very precise. We don't need to interpret his words, but it does help to have a dedicated practitioner and teacher who understands the totality of the teachings of the Buddha to kind of guide you towards understanding how one teaching is connected to another and things like this. And then after I share some teachings on each individual chapter, then I will open up to any and all questions that you guys have. So this class is more like a study group where other programs that I teach is more of traditional style of learning. So if there's anyone in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read this first chapter, you're more than welcome to do that. And then all you need to do is raise your hand electronically and unmute your microphone. And then when we get to the question period, you guys can ask questions as well. Whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can just ask questions by putting that into the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Samantha's volunteering for this first one, so you can go ahead, ma'am.
6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry. Monks, these are the 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry. What 6? 1. One is fixed in the wholesome teachings. 2. One is incapable of decline. 3. One's discontentedness is limited. 4. One comes to possess wisdom not shared by others. 5. One has clearly seen causation. 6. One has clearly seen causally arisen objects. These are the 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So here, the Buddha is providing these 6 aspects of benefits that one will experience having gotten to the first stage of enlightenment. I'll walk you through these so you understand more detail behind these. So the first one that he's talking about is that one is fixed in the wholesome teachings. By the time someone's gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, they've eliminated all doubt about the teachings. That fetter is completely eliminated from the mind. And the way that occurs is through actually investigating and examining the teachings. You reflect on them to independently verify them, and then you practice them, integrating them into your day-to-day life. And as you're doing so, you're going to see the improvement to the condition of the mind in your life. And having done so, you will get to a point where you have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved life, an improved condition of mind, and you'll be fixed in these wholesome teachings, meaning that you're not going to get dissuaded and just decide like, oh, I'm not going to practice those anymore. You will have seen way too much progress before you get to this first stage of enlightenment. And getting into that first stage of enlightenment, you'll be fixed in these teachings, meaning you'll continue to learn and practice these for the rest of your life because you've just seen too much progress. And that progress that you've experienced, you'll be incapable of decline, meaning your mind won't regress backwards. Once you get to that first stage of enlightenment, there's certain enhanced qualities that you've seen because you've already put together the Eightfold Path. You've already moved through the jhanas and experiencing the qualities of mind there. And now being in that first stage of enlightenment, there's enhanced qualities of mind that you're experiencing and your mind won't regress backwards. Because in the jhanas, if you became complacent, your mind could actually decline or regress. But by the time you get to that first stage of enlightenment, you've eliminated your doubt, so you'll just continue to practice and walk forward. You won't actually decline from that point forward. Those qualities that you're experiencing, while they're improved and they're enhanced, they won't actually decline. And from that point forward, you need to continue to stay dedicated and diligent so that you can continue to make progress going forward. You'll notice that in the first stage of enlightenment that your discontentedness is limited, meaning that any discontentedness that you've experienced in the past when you were off the path to enlightenment, that's diminished. It's a mere fraction of what it once was when you were in the unenlightened state, in the either prior to the first stage of enlightenment or when you were off the path to enlightenment. There's been this significant improvement so that your discontentedness has been limited. So where in the past you might have experienced intense anger or this really high, excitement, that's been brought to the middle a bit more. You're still experiencing discontentedness, but it's now limited. And you'll have noticed that as part of having practiced the teachings. You'll notice that there's certain wisdom that you have that other people don't actually have, because there's certain things that you're learning about the world. Remember, the teachings of the Buddha aren't about how the world should be. It's not rules and commandments. It's not rites and rituals and ceremonies of worship. It's teaching you about the natural world around you and helping you understand the natural laws of existence. And this is wisdom that not everybody understands. So you'll have certain wisdom having gotten to that first stage of enlightenment that others don't have, like the universal truth of impermanence and discontentedness and non-self, the Four Noble Truths, understanding the Eightfold Path, understanding the natural law of Karma, and other things like this. And it's really important as you're making your way into that first stage of enlightenment and you're becoming more and more clear that you have wisdom that others don't have, that things are so easy and simple for you that you don't allow the conceit to arise. Because conceit is still in the mind at that point, and it's very easy that as your mind's becoming more concentrated or more focused, you have wisdom about the world that others don't have. It can become very easy for the mind to become conceitful, prideful, boastful, arrogant. And you're going to need to keep that in check, because otherwise you're not going to be able to actually get to enlightenment. So you're going to need to cut that out and just understand that other people don't have this wisdom because they just haven't been exposed to the teachings. They haven't taken their time to actively find the teachings in the way that you have. So you're going to need to maintain that humbleness. By the time one's got to the first stage of enlightenment, they have clearly seen causation. What this means is that you've seen the natural law of Karma. Now, by the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you know that the natural law of Karma is 100% the truth. You haven't fully awoke in terms of you still have ignorance or unknowing of true reality in your mind, but you've clearly seen it. You know that it's true. It's this cause and effect, or this action and result. It's the results of your decisions. That when you're making wise or unwise decisions, you're experiencing either wholesome karma or unwholesome karma. So you've seen this natural law in your day-to-day life, and you know that it's true. So you've clearly seen this causation. And now it's a matter of getting more fully awake to it as you make your journey further into the second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. And one has also clearly seen causally arisen objects. What this is referring to is dependent origination, that by the time somebody's gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, they understand dependent origination. They haven't fully dismantled it yet. That doesn't occur until you're actually experiencing enlightenment, but you've clearly understood it. You've penetrated it. This is a teaching that we studied last week as part of this book series, chapter 14 in volume 5. So you're going to need to penetrate into that and make sure you understand it, because this teaching of dependent origination is helping you to understand all the detail of exactly why you experience discontentedness and why you keep experiencing rebirth over and over. You're going to need to know what each one of those 12 interlinking objects are, and you're going to need to understand how they flow. So you should understand that, because of ignorance, there's volitional formations. Because of volitional formations, that leads to consciousness. Because of the consciousness, that leads to the name and form. Name and form leads to the 6 sense spaces. The 6 sense spaces leads to feelings. Feelings leads to contact. Contact leads to feelings. Feelings leads to craving. Craving leads to clinging. Clinging leads to existence. Then you experience aging and death, and then sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. And I missed birth in there because birth is in there too. There's existence and then birth, and then aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. These are the 12 interlinking steps that you need to be able to understand, so that way you understand what this teaching is individually, each object, and then in its totality, what it's explaining to you. is that this is the cycle of rebirth. This is why an individual keeps staying stuck in this continuous cycle, and why discontentedness keeps being experienced over and over and over again. So an individual who's in that first stage of enlightenment will have clearly understood each one of those factors, and they'll understand the series of sequences, how one leads to the other, that leads to the other. This is the wisdom of principle and the wisdom of entailment that we studied in our last class. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So I have a question about the second one. I don't understand how you can be incapable of decline.
The reason why is because the mind has reached a certain level of development that you're not going to be complacent at that point. From having eliminated doubt, an individual's mind is just going to keep growing and keep evolving from that point forward. You're going to be getting closer and closer to enlightenment. You won't go backwards because you won't allow the mind to become complacent, because you know that it's these teachings that are leading to enlightenment. And it's just a matter of continuing to learn and practice before the mind is actually enlightened. The condition that we experience in the unenlightened state, that is a condition of the mind, where the mind is experiencing conditional experiences that arise, that change, and that fade away. As you're getting rid of those pollutions, you're eliminating the conditions that are causing the conditioned feelings. But as you're getting rid of those pollutions, you're now getting more and more to an unconditioned mind, to the purity of the mind. And by the time the mind gets to enlightenment, it'll just always be in that mental state. It's incapable of ever experiencing things like anger, sadness, frustration, and others, because the causes and conditions that produce it have been uprooted. So by the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you've eliminated a certain amount of pollution, and the mind has seen enough progress that it won't actually go backwards, because the mind won't become complacent. It'll just continue to grow and develop and evolve from that point forward. You might go through periods of time in the first stage of enlightenment where you might not learn for a specific period of time. Like you might go 3 months or 4 months where you're just kind of practicing what you already know, but your mind won't slip backwards and regress.
Okay, because I was kind of thinking of it like this magical thing where your mind just declines, but it's more related to like doubt and Gama, where it's like you actually have to put in the effort to get there.
Exactly, because by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you've eliminated personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. So you know through having understood dependent origination that it's a matter of cultivation of wisdom that's going to lead to improvement in the condition of the mind. And you will have seen a certain amount of that. So yeah, you don't have any doubt about the teachings, and you've improved your moral conduct to a certain degree that you're not doing any very significant unwise things that would lead to unwholesome Gama. You're still producing unwholesome Gama in that first stage of enlightenment, but it's not the significant type that we would have created prior to understanding these teachings. So you're not going to be making very significant unwise decisions. So like, for example, someone in the first stage of enlightenment isn't going to go kill somebody. They're not going to go steal. They're not going to have sexual misconduct. They're not going to be lying or taking intoxicants. All those things have been eliminated. So you've significantly reduced the production of unwholesome Gama. And now you're just going to continue to make your way forward in your mental state of the concentration and the mindfulness and the tranquility and the equanimity and all these other qualities that are being experienced. Those are going to reside in the mind, and it's going to stay in that stage of enlightenment. And it's only going to make forward progress from that point forward.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, David. I had two questions. One was on the decline. So on decline, is it that the practitioner will continue to make forward progress, or is that even if they don't make forward progress for whatever reason, the mind will not decline? So for whatever reason, they stop practicing. I can't think of a reason, but it's more of a theoretical question.
Yeah.
Will they still not decline?
Yeah, their mind won't decline backwards. So somebody could get into that first stage of enlightenment, and let's just say they are in the first stage of enlightenment for 10 years, and then they die at the end of 10 years. In that 10-year period, they're still learning and practicing and growing. They just never made it to the second stage of enlightenment during that period of time. But their mind isn't declining backwards. They're continuing to make forward progress, meaning they're continuing to grow and learn and develop, but they just haven't done enough of that to get to the second stage of enlightenment. But if you are really diligent, you shouldn't need, that amount of time to go from the first stage of enlightenment to the second stage of enlightenment. But this is something that's possible if somebody doesn't continue to really hone in on the teachings, but they're not going to decline backwards, because somebody could die in the first stage of enlightenment and then they're going to experience rebirth into the human world, but they're not going to experience decline during that period of time where they got to the first stage of enlightenment. Their mind's not going to regress backwards.
Thank you. Second question is on the limited discontentedness. So I understand, like, the first stage of enlightenment compared to what you had a practitioner had before, there's very limited, and I think there was a teaching about that as well. My question is more on the first to and the second stage of enlightenment. In the second stage, it says that the sensual desire and ill will are significantly diminished, but it's not. Is that something tangible that a person can experience? Saying what is significant reduction of sensual desire from stage 1 to stage 2, so that they can clearly see that they're in stage 2, or is it something hard to kind of grasp?
Yeah, like what you'll notice in the second stage of enlightenment is that you're not doing things like eating based in emotion, right? Because that's like a central desire. You'll notice that there's much more peacefulness, where there were things before where you really craved for them to be a certain way and really wanted them to be a certain way. You'll notice that you've let those things go, that the mind isn't expecting things to be a certain way. And that because of that, your central desire has been reduced and your discontentedness has been reduced even further from the first stage of enlightenment. And whenever you're reducing central desire, ill will is going to be reduced too, because you're not having that triggered because you have less and less central desire. But it's not like we can say, like, if you have eliminated these specific types of central desire, then we know that you're in the second stage of enlightenment. But you're going to see this significant reduction in central desire, where you're not chasing and longing, yearning after things anymore. The mind's going to be much calmer than it was before, because you're not being pulled in all these different directions based on your central desire. But central desire is like a big mountain, and everybody has different central desires. So that's why you can't really give like very specific things, but you'll know that your discontentedness has diminished, and you'll know that your ill will, that anger, right? So you'll have seen this occurring in your day-to-day life, and you'll know that you're there. But ultimately, you need to eliminate all of central desire and ill will. So when it goes, kind of 1 year, and you haven't experienced any anger or any of the lesser versions like frustration or irritation or annoyance, or even the slightest dislike towards other beings, this is how you'll know that your ill will has been eliminated. That's a more tangible thing, getting into the third stage of enlightenment, where the second stage of enlightenment is much more subjective, because it's a thinning of central desire and ill will. It's not an actual elimination of it.
That's what I was trying to understand. So, like, unless you get to like the third stage, you won't really know that you were maybe in the second stage or not as much.
You'll know, because you'll see that your central desire has significantly diminished. But everybody has different central desires. For example, like a lot of people have really strong sexual craving, but some people don't. Even from when they were growing up as teenagers and early adulthood, they don't really have strong sexual craving, but they might have other cravings. So this is something that you'll have to see for yourself. But I can't say, like, if you eliminate this particular central desire, this is an indication that you're in the second stage of enlightenment. But if you look at your central desire in your day-to-day life prior to the path to enlightenment, you'll see this big mountain of central desires. And then you'll see that that will significantly diminish and greatly thin by the time you get to the second stage. It's just not a way to tangibly tell you these particular ones. You're going to have to be able to see this for yourself through your own development. But ultimately, you're working to get rid of central desire and ill will. So just stay focused on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Pat's going to volunteer for this one. All right, go ahead, Pat.
A stream enterer is worth more than being a wheel-turning monarch. Monks, although a wheel-turning monarch, having exercised supreme sovereign rulership over the 4 continents, with the breakup of the body after death, is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world, in the company of the heavenly beings of the heavenly realm, and there in the Dandana Grove, accompanied by an entourage of heavenly nymphs, he enjoys himself supplied and endowed with the 5 chords of heavenly sensual pleasure. Still, as he does not possess 4 things, he is not freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, not freed from the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld. Although, monks, a noble disciple maintains himself by lumps of alms food and wears rag robes, still, as he possesses 4 things, he is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld. What are the 4? 1. Here, monks, the noble disciple possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha. Thus, the Tathagata is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the worlds, unsurpassed leader of the persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. 2. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings. Thus, the teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. 3. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community. Thus, the community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. This community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. He possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. He possesses these 4 things. And, monks, between the obtaining of sovereignty over the 4 continents and the obtaining of the 4 things, the obtaining of sovereignty over the 4 continents is not worth a 16th part of the obtaining of the 4 things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here, first, let's talk about a wheel-turning monarch. A wheel-turning monarch is an individual who's a leader, and during the lifetime of the Buddha, that would have been a king or a queen, someone who's ruling over a large population of people, and they're doing so based on the teachings of the Buddha. So, for example, a king or a queen who is making decisions based on the natural law of Gama, that would be very helpful for the population of people that they're, ruling over, so to speak. Where nowadays, we might consider this like a president or a prime minister. We do have kings and queens and stuff like that. We might even think about this as a community leader, even like a boss or an employer or something like that. If they are actively understanding the teachings of the Buddha to a certain degree, they're not a stream enterer, but they're understanding the teachings to a certain degree, and they're kind of managing their company, for example, in the way of the teachings of the Buddha. This person could be considered a wheel-turning monarch. The wheel that they're referring to is the Dhamma wheel. And that turning of that Dhamma wheel is to bring the teachings into the world in a way that other people can get access to them. So if somebody is kind of ruling over a population of people, maybe 50,000 or 100,000 people in a kingdom, and they're doing so based on the teachings of the Buddha, these people are, by way of this leader, learning the teachings of the Buddha to a certain degree. So they are turning the wheel. They were bringing the teachings into the world. And the Buddha is saying, okay, this person's beneficial and they are going to be reborn into the heavenly world and they're going to experience these things, but they're not free from the lower realms. They're not free from the hell, animal, and afflicted spirit realm. They're not freed from that plane of misery, is what he calls it, the bad destinations, the netherworld. Then he starts talking about the noble disciple, an individual who's deeply penetrated his teachings and is practicing them well. That's what a noble disciple is. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, nobility were people who were born into affluent families, and now they would go out into the world and they were born into that affluent family and people would know that they're nobility. Where people who were born into like a lower caste system, a lower family, they would have maybe rag robes or rags on and not very nice clothing. The nobility would walk around with their right shoulder exposed. So when they went out into the public, people knew that they were part of this affluent family. There was a very strong caste system in place. So when people would come to learn with the Buddha, he would refer to them as noble disciples when they had gotten to a certain stage of development in their practice. And this is why the ordained practitioners walk around exposing their right shoulder. This is held over from the lifetime of the Buddha, that when you go out into the world, they would expose their right shoulder. So even if somebody was born into a lower caste family, if they came and studied with the Buddha, they would wear this rag robes and they would expose their right shoulder, as an indication of being part of a noble class, right? And the Buddha didn't think about people in a class system. He taught the opposite of this, but he was basically helping people see that, hey, it's not where you're born. If you're born into a low family, you can still be noble, so to speak. And that comes from training your mind and cultivating wisdom and making wise decisions about your speech and your actions and things like this. And someone who's penetrated the teachings fairly deeply would have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and they would have a certain amount of moral conduct that has been improved. These first three are considered to be what's called the triple gem or the triple jewel. This is what you need to be able to get to enlightenment, and even to the first stage of enlightenment, is you need to have confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community, where you have this elimination of doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, and the community, that you have not only confidence about the Buddha, but you have access to his teachings. That's what's going to allow you to build this confidence. And you're part of a community, because by being part of a community, you can learn from other people. It's not just the teacher that you're learning from. You're observing how other people function in the community, how they're polite or kind or friendly or respectful, how they might practice generosity, how they're maybe not shy to do certain things, how they're helpful to others. And you're like, wow, I really like how that person did that. I think I might do some of those things. So when you're around people that are into doing wholesome things, your mind will tend to lean in that direction. Just like if you're around people who are doing unwholesome things, your mind will tend to lean in that direction. So if you're able to cultivate this confidence in the Buddha, if you have this confidence in his teachings in the community, this will help lean towards enlightenment. And this occurs through examination and investigation of his teachings. So that's what you would like to ultimately be able to get to, is where you have that confidence. Because when you first come to the path, you don't have the confidence because the mind hasn't investigated the teachings close enough. So by having confidence in the Buddha, by having access to his teachings and developing the confidence there, being part of a community and developing confidence there, more and more you'll develop this improved moral conduct, where you're now not causing so much harm in the world any longer, that you've improved your speech, your actions, and your livelihood. And now, having done so, you're experiencing less and less wholesome results coming back to you, because you're not causing harm in the world to other beings. And what the Buddha is saying is, someone who's gotten to this point where they have these four things, they're actually more beneficial to the world than this wheel-turning monarch who's ruling over 50 or 100,000 people. That this individual, being in the first stage of enlightenment, going out into the world, they're going to be interacting with people in ways that is very beneficial. So like someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment, they're practicing moral conduct to a certain degree. Say you're going in and out of stores and you're being polite and kind and friendly and respectful to the cashier. Maybe you're holding the door for people occasionally when you're walking into different stores. Maybe you're practicing some generosity here and there. Other people are going to take notice of that, and they're going to start practicing it as well. People tend to follow the people that are around them. So if there's a community of people that have individuals who are in the four stages of enlightenment, this is very nice to live in that kind of environment. This is one of the reasons why people come to places like Thailand. people think that here it's pretty peaceful because you've got millions of people that are learning and practicing these teachings to a certain degree, and you got a lot of peacefulness in the community. You don't see people judging each other. You don't see bitterness and harshness and hostility. You don't really see a whole lot of stealing and rapes and murders and things like this because people are practicing the teachings. They understand the natural law of karma. So a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment going off into the world and interacting in the world, they're going to be beneficial to the world, where this wheel-turning monarch is also going to be beneficial to the world, but the Buddha is saying not as beneficial as this one person who's gotten to the first stage of enlightenment and has confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and is practicing this improved moral conduct, because the wheel-turning monarch will not have all four of these things, but they will be practicing to a certain degree and be beneficial to, a certain degree, but not as beneficial as someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment. Okay, so let me know what questions you guys have by putting those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raising your hand in Zoom. Looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So I just wanted to check and see if this is kind of like the quality over quantity kind of thing, where it's like just having one person who is like higher quality, like equality and all, but like higher quality than having all of these people who are kind of like not as advanced as that one person.
Exactly. It's having this person who's more further advanced in their practice that's going to be much more beneficial to the world than just one person who's kind of practicing the teachings, to a certain degree and leading all these other people. But the more purity of the teachings that you have coming into a community, the more beneficial it's going to be for that community. So anybody who's in the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment will have a fairly deep understanding of the teachings, and that'll be very beneficial for the community and at large.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, so Vibhav, you have a question?
So I had a question about the turning of the wheel. So it's kind of related, but not exactly. So the turning of the Dhamma wheel when Buddha started to teach, is that a more metaphorical thing that, like, because he gave his first discourse to the first 5 disciples and that set the wheel in motion? Or is that something that he had to do, or a Buddha has to do to set the wheel in motion?
It's actually both of those things. A Buddha has a flat spot on the back of their head from where the top of the crown of their head and the back of their skull comes together. There's a flat spot there, and they do reach up with their hand and literally turn that Dhamma wheel in the direction of counterclockwise, but it's not a physical thing. So it is metaphoric, but they actually do at a certain point in time upon their awakening reach up and turn that wheel. And then as they teach the very first time, it's setting this motion in place where now humanity has entered into a new era. The civilization and humanity has made steps forward, that the teachings are now shining in the world because a Buddha existing in the world. The teachings are going to now be shining in the world in a way that they didn't prior to this person's existence.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I can just go back to the course before, the teaching before this. I thought I had a question, but I forgot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the question was more around the seeing the causally arisen objects, and seeing the causation in around you. So it's I guess it's even before someone gets into stream entry, it's kind of easy to, not easy, I guess, it's getting clearer that when you look around you and you see other people behaving in a certain way, you can see the cause of their discontentedness. And so is what the saying is, but that becomes really clear once you get into stream entry, that you can see whichever, when you see something happening, that you can see what the cause of that discontentedness is, or is something more on the lines of, if somebody does Sorry, let me just rephrase the question.
I understand what you're asking. It's okay, Viphav.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is true, that someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment and even prior to that, you will be able to observe other people's discontentedness and you will know what's causing it. You'll know it's their cravings, desires, attachments. You might even be able to start seeing what their craving, desires, attachments are, even though they don't see it themselves. But that's not what this is referring to. This is referring to dependent origination, that you've penetrated dependent origination and you've been able to see it clearly, meaning you understand it clearly. So when the Buddha talks about seeing or vision, it means you have wisdom of that thing and you understand it.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 23. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Viphav, go ahead, sir.
There cannot be alteration in a stream entry. Monks, there may be alteration in the four great elements in the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the wind element, but cannot be alteration in the noble disciple who possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha, in the teachings, in the community. Therein there is alteration. That the noble disciple who possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. This is impossible. Monks, there may be alteration in the four great elements in the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the wind element, but there cannot be alteration in the noble disciple who possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones. Therein this is alteration. That the noble disciple who possesses the virtues, moral conduct dear to the noble ones, might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. This is impossible.
Okay, thank you, Viphav. So here what the Buddha is talking about is that there might be change to the four great elements, meaning earth, water, fire, and wind. He's referring to the physical body here. Whenever you hear him talking about these four elements, he's talking about the physical body because that's how they used to diagnose the body before we knew about, cells and molecules and things like this. This is how they would refer to the physical body. So the earth element is the solids of the body, like your teeth, your bones, your hair, your fingernails. These are the solids of the body. The water element is the liquids, like the tear, the saliva, the pus, the blood, urine, things like this. Then the fire is the temperature of the body, oftentimes associated with digestion. And the wind is the movement inside the body. So like the blood is of the water element mostly, but the movement of the blood through the vein is the wind element. Or the feces in the colon, a lot of it is the earth element, but sometimes it can be a little bit watery too, right? But the movement of that is the wind element. So whenever he's referring to earth, water, fire, and wind, he's talking about the physical body. So what he's saying is there can be change to this physical body, and this physical body will change. But an individual who has confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and is practicing moral conduct to a certain degree, there's not any change to the condition of their mind. That's what he's referring to. It's impossible for this individual to be reborn into the lower realms of hell, animal, or afflicted spirits, and it's impossible for their mind to regress backwards, that their condition of their mind isn't going to regress or move backwards, like we were talking about in the previous discourse. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we got chapter 24. We got a whole series of cases of incapability by one accomplished in view. So is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
6 cases of incapability by one accomplished in will. First discourse. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. What 6? One accomplished in will is 1. Incapable of considering any conditioned phenomenon thing as permanent. 2. Incapable of considering any conditioned phenomenal thing as pleasurable. 3. Incapable of considering any phenomenon thing as a self. 4. Incapable of doing a brave act that brings immediate results. 5. Incapable of resorting to the brave. that purity enlightenment comes about through superstitious and auspicious acts. 6. Incapable of seeking a person worthy of offerings outside here. These are the 6 cases of incapability. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. Okay, so you're going to see a whole series of things that one who is accomplished in view would be practicing, and that they certain wisdom that they would have and certain things that they would be practicing. So we've talked about establishing right view in all the foundational classes, and that's understanding the Four Noble Truths and practicing that closely. And you would have learned that from me from the foundational classes. But then not only is there establishing of right view, there's accomplishment in view. In order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you need to have accomplishment in view. And this goes beyond the establishing of right view. So all these series of discourses that you're going to see here, you need to check in on these and make sure that you're understanding each one of these, because this is what's going to help you to get to accomplishment in view and be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment, because there's going to be a whole series of them. It's not just these 6. There's others as well. So the Buddha oftentimes teaches this way, where he's giving you 6 things here, but then there's other discourses where he's going to be teaching you about other things. And they're all in a series here. So you could actually check in on each one of these as I explain them to you, and ask me questions if you need help with any of these, so that you can get to accomplishment in view. You're going to need that in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So one who is accomplished in view will be incapable of considering any conditioned object or thing as permanent. And that's because someone has deeply understood the universal truth of impermanence. They understand that things are constantly changing, that there's these conditioned objects that arise, they change, and they fade away. So you're not going to be able to consider any particular object as being permanent. And that's someone who is accomplished in view, would have that under their belt. And you guys probably already have that one, because I help you to understand that when you first start learning with me. You'd be incapable of considering any conditioned object or thing or phenomenon as pleasurable, meaning that you'll understand that conditioned objects isn't going to lead to permanent pleasure, that the mind is craving, desire, attachment, and chasing after things. You've already seen that chasing after conditioned objects, while it leads to conditioned pleasant feelings, those pleasant feelings are essentially unsatisfying, because they arise, they change, and they fade away. So you won't see conditioned objects as being pleasurable, because they are essentially temporary pleasure that you're getting here. That instead you're working towards this unconditioned joy, this unconditioned happiness, where you can just enjoy everything around you. But this conditional pleasantness, you won't see that as being very pleasant, because you will have already seen that by allowing your mind to get conditioned pleasant feelings, it's going to end up in the painful feelings at some point. It's just a matter of time. So that's the reason why you won't see these conditioned objects as being pleasurable, because you know that it's temporary, therefore it's unsatisfactory, and it's going to ultimately lead to these painful feelings anyway. So you don't see it as being pleasurable. But by the time you get to the unconditioned happiness and joy, your mind's just always experiencing pleasurable experiences. You're just always enjoying everything that you're doing. Then the third one here is incapable of considering any object or thing as a self, that there is no self, that prior to having accomplishment in view, you still have personal existence view in the mind, that the mind might be considering that this body or this mind is you and who you are. But when you get to this point where you're accomplished in view, you won't be able to identify anything that is a self. Your mind won't be grasping to any particular thing, because you understand the universal truth of non-self. So these first 3 are related to the universal truth of impermanence, discontentedness, and non-self. And those are things that you're learning when you first get started with me. Then this 4th one, where he says incapable of doing a grave act that brings immediate results. We're going to be studying this here in a moment. Some people refer to these as the 5 heinous crimes. These are things like murdering your mother and your father, murdering a Buddha, a Tathagata, things like this. You're going to see it here in a moment, because these things are really significant, that if you did these things, it's going to bring this really heavy, unwholesome karma, that you'd be incapable of doing this by the time you get to this accomplishment in view. And we'll explain why when we get to that point. And then you'll be incapable of resorting to the belief that purity or enlightenment comes about through superstitious or auspicious acts, because you will have already penetrated dependent origination. You would already know that teaching, and you would have seen that very clearly. And you would know that in order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom. And there is no rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship that's going to lead to the cultivation of wisdom. So there isn't any superstitious or auspicious acts that's going to lead to enlightenment. It's through the cultivation of wisdom, training your mind, uprooting the pollutions of mind that are hindering it from experiencing enlightenment, eliminating the 10 fetters. So you will have seen dependent origination very clearly. So you won't have the belief that there's any superstitious or auspicious things that it's going to bring about change to the condition of your mind or your life. And you will be incapable of seeking a person worthy of offerings outside of here. What the Buddha is talking about here is during his lifetime, there were many teachers who were teaching different things. There were teachers who were teaching people to hang themselves upside down from trees, pierce their body with metal implements, lay on beds of nails, starving the body. And they were saying this is what it takes to get to enlightenment. And there was his teachings that was all about training the mind. And there was all these people that were claiming that it was their teachings that lead to enlightenment. And then there was all these people who were in the kind of community, not his community, but just at the community at large, who were making offerings to these aesthetics. And they were practicing generosity. But by the time you've gotten to accomplishment in view, you will have understood a lot of wisdom, and you'll know that this hanging people upside down from trees and starving yourself and laying on beds of nails, this isn't what leads to enlightenment. You will have penetrated the teachings of the Buddha deeply enough that you will know that it's his teachings that lead to enlightenment, and you would be incapable of making offerings to anybody outside of the community of the teachings of the Buddha, his actual true teachings, because you will know how beneficial they are for the world, and you will be interested in supporting those rather than supporting these other individuals who aren't teaching the actual true teachings. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would offer food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. That's essentially what he received. And nowadays, we accept some financial offerings because students aren't there with us all the time, like during the lifetime of the Buddha, that there's certain things we need to purchase. So that's why we accept financial contributions now. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, he only accepted those kinds of things where he lived in people's houses. They fed him, they gave him clothing and medical care and things like this. And he basically shared the teachings, and that was the exchange. Well, if you've done that enough and you've penetrated his teachings well enough, and you see how true they are, you would be incapable of supporting anybody who's not actually teaching those particular things, because you're interested in seeing those teachings come into the world. And that's why he says you'd be incapable of essentially supporting an individual with offerings that was outside of this particular set of teachings. And that's what your mind will have accomplished by getting to this accomplishment in view, because you would have penetrated the teachings to a certain degree. So as I mentioned, there's more than just these 6, but this is the first one. So let me know what questions you guys have here. So it looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So with the second one, kind of like from an example of my life, like I still eat food, like to please the tongue, but I know that it's not the actual food that's causing it. It's just like such an intense craving that I just have to satisfy it every now and then. So in that case, would I still not be considering it as pleasurable, even though I'm doing it for pleasure to let it go?
Yeah, this is related to what the mind understands, that the mind understands that this food is not pleasurable. And although you're still having sensual desire and you're choosing to eat the food, your mind understands that this isn't ultimately what's going to bring permanent pleasure for you.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
David, I had a question about non-self. So I understand that there is no self, but there's also the independent origination. We're saying that, and the law of karma says that any phenomena, any wholesome or unwholesome karma is the result of somebody's actions, like one's actions, right? What choice and decision they make and the actions they take. And we also understand that and the actions are basically taken by the mind, right? And we say that the five aggregates, the consciousness is impermanent. So my question really is that if the mind is impermanent and there is no self, who's making, like, in from like this some framework perspective, who's actually making the choices and decisions that lead to the wholesome and unwholesome concept? My question, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the mind that's making those decisions, but that mind isn't the self.
Yeah, that part I get. So the mind is not the self, but it's still the mind that is making the decisions, and it's impermanent. So it is basically making different decisions at different points of time based on whatever understanding it has of the situation.
Yes.
That's the way to think about it.
Yeah, the mind's making the decisions there, but that isn't who you are. So like if somebody's made the decision to use drugs and alcohol in the past, those were decisions that the mind was making based on its cravings and its desires, but that's not who you are. So the whole idea of I am an alcoholic or I am an addict, that's what you got to peel away from the mind and not see it that way, is that you are incapable of seeing any particular object as being who you are. So it's not this physical form that is you. It's not these feelings. It's not the perceptions. It's not the choices and decisions. And it's not the mind itself. None of those things are you, but there is a mind that is making decisions, but it's just not who you are as a person.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, so I don't see any questions anywhere else. So let's go to the next one, which is a similar discourse, but now we're going to get 6 more things. So we're going to get a whole series of things here. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
6 cases of incapability by one accomplished in view, second discourse. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. What 6? One accomplished in view is, number 1, incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness toward the teacher. 2, incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness toward the teachings. 3, incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness toward the community. 4, incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness toward the training. 5, incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon. 6, incapable of undergoing an 8th existence. These are the 6 cases of incapability.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So we'll go through these in the same way, helping you to understand what they are, and then you're going to need to check in on these and make sure that you're practicing these in order to get to accomplishment in view and that you're understanding them in the mind. So the first one is that an individual is incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the teacher. By the time someone's got to accomplishment in view, which leads to this first stage of enlightenment, an individual would have seen significant progress to the condition of their mind in their life. And they would know that it's this particular teacher that has helped them to be able to accomplish that improvement. And if someone's teaching the way that the Buddha taught, they don't want anything from their students. They don't expect anything from their students. They've just been helping this person out of the kindness of their heart, so to speak. So for you to have experienced a significant amount of progress and improvement and seeing how the condition of your mind and your life is improved, you'd be incapable of being without deep respect and politeness towards this person who has helped you to make your way to that improved mental state and that improved way of life. Then you would not be capable of having deep respect and politeness towards the teachings themselves, because that's what's actually led to that improvement to the condition of the mind in your life. And the same thing with the members of the community, that the members of the community are things that are people that you've been learning from as well. You've been observing them in certain situations. So the members of your community, you'd be able to have deep respect and politeness towards. But maybe that person who's out on the street that you run into, you might still be disrespectful or impolite to them. But in terms of the people who are in your community at this point in time, you'd be able to have deep respect and politeness towards them because you know it's this community that's being supportive and encouraging and helpful to you to be able to make your way to enlightenment. Because even though you have accomplishment in view, you still have sensual desire and you still have ill will. And that's why you can still be maybe disrespectful or impolite towards other beings that are in other areas of your life. But in terms of the community that you're learning from, you would be respectful and polite to those individuals. Incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the training. That's the actual training and the way to actually train your mind is part of these teachings. Then you're incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon. What this is referring to is that by the time you've got to accomplishment in view, and remember, we're talking about the first stage of enlightenment here, is that you have already done a certain amount of learning, examination, and investigation. You've been reflecting to independently verify, and you've been practicing integrating teachings into your life, and you're getting to more and more wisdom. And you would be incapable of just believing in something by the time you've gotten to this point of accomplishment in view. You're going to be interested in seeing the truth and knowing the truth. So the example I gave this morning at the temple is like, I could be downstairs and my son might come downstairs and say, hey, Dad, I've cleaned my room, right? Well, I'm not going to just believe that, right? Until I see it with my own eyes. I'm not going to know that it actually happened until I see it with my own eyes. And the reason why an individual who's accomplished in view would be interested in doing this is because they understand the natural law of karma closely. And they would know that if they're making decisions based on something that is not true, then that means they're making an unwise decision, and it's going to lead to unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. So an individual who's accomplished in view knows that if they're going to make a decision, they need to make decisions based on wisdom. They need to make sure that they're understand the truth and what is actually true before they make a decision. And they'll even delay their decision making until they actually get to a point where they've fully gathered all the information. Where when there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, your mind will chase and chase and chase and chase, and you'll run after things. And you'll sometimes haphazardly make decisions without actually waiting to ensure that you have the full truth. So by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you will have understood the natural law of karma to a certain degree that you will take in the totality of a situation, even confirming it through seeing it with your own eyes before you actually make a decision. And that's what the Buddha is talking about here, that you're not going to just make decision based in belief or things that you don't know to be true. You're going to verify certain things. And then when you see it with your own eyes, then you know that this is the truth. And now I can make a wise decision that's going to produce wholesome results. Then the sixth one is incapable of undergoing an eighth existence. This is because the individual who's accomplished in view has gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, and now they're not going to experience an eighth existence. They're going to get to enlightenment within 7 existences. So these are all incapabilities for someone who's accomplished in view. And we're going to get more here. These are just the first 2 discourses. So any questions here on this one? Okay, it looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So I don't understand how you can have like respect and politeness towards the training.
Yeah, this is that when you have been training through like the 5 precepts and the Eightfold Path and stuff like this, that you will have respect towards it. You'll have meaning that you will have confidence in it. You will know that this is the truth because it's been leading to this improved condition of your mind. So it's not like you're going to be out and someone's like, hey, what's going on with that Eightfold Path? If you were like bad mouthing the Eightfold Path and stuff like this isn't to have politeness and respect towards it. But if you understand, like if someone's like, hey, what's up with that teaching of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path? If you have politeness and respect towards it, you're like, oh yeah, this works for sure. I've seen it 100%. This actually really truly works. You would have respect and politeness towards it in the way that you speak about it to others.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Vibhav.
A slightly different question, I guess was on the previous teaching. So when people come in contact with the stream mentor without knowing that they're stream mentors, how does that affect their own karma? The question says they're offering like food, and there's been teachings around saying that if they're offering teachings to a person who is working towards being a stream mentor or has reached stream entry, and they're offering food and shelter and clothing to such folks, the people who are doing that will experience better karma. So, but if people are not aware of that, they are actually coming in contact with stream mentors or people who are on the path to stream entry, how does that without the awareness, does that still affect the karma?
Yeah, they're still experiencing wholesome karma in that situation because this stream enter is practicing in an improved way above and beyond what an average person in the world is practicing. So by interacting with someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment, whether you're aware of it or not, you're experiencing beneficial results because now you're being able to absorb the wisdom that they're practicing, either just through observing them in practice and being like, wow, I really like the way that person does that. Or if you're actually making offerings to the person, this is an opportunity to sit down and talk with them and gain their understanding and wisdom. And even if you didn't know that they were a stream enterer, if you're asking a stream enterer questions and you're getting details back about how, what they're doing in their day-to-day life and how they practice, this is going to help you to produce wholesome karma because you're gaining more and more wisdom. It's all about cultivation of wisdom. And now with that wisdom, you'll function in an improved way.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one, which this is the third discourse. So now, Pat, go ahead, sir.
Six cases of incompatibility by one accomplished in view. Third discourse. Incapability, I'm sorry. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. What 6? One accomplished in view is incapable of depriving his mother of life, incapable of depriving his father of life, incapable of depriving an arahant of life, incapable of shedding the Tathagata's blood with a mind of hatred, incapable of creating a division in the community, incapable of acknowledging another teacher. These are the 6 cases of incapability.
Okay, thank you, sir. So these first 5 here is what I was referring to before when I was talking about the 5 heinous crimes, or the Buddha was talking about incapable of performing an act that would bring grave results and immediate results, right? These are the first 5 here. So an individual who's accomplished in view would be incapable of killing their mother or their father. And the reason why is because having gotten to that first stage of enlightenment and seeing the significant improvement to the condition of your mind, and the mind's not even enlightened yet, the qualities that you're going to be experiencing in enlightenment are far outweighing the qualities that you experience in the first stage of enlightenment. But even in that first stage of enlightenment, it's like, oh my goodness, like you're really experiencing an improved state of mind. And you will know that it's coming into this human life that was able for you to be able to accomplish that. And it was your mother and father that afforded you that ability to be able to do that through the struggles and challenges that they had. They were the ones who brought you into this world to be able to now be able to have this life. It was your decisions in your past life not to get to enlightenment, but it was your mother and father's decision in this life to actually have a child so that that consciousness could come into the world. And now you would be able to make your way to enlightenment, or even this first stage of enlightenment. So you would be incapable of choosing to kill them because you would know how important they were for you to be able to get to this improved state of mind. The same thing is true that you would be incapable of killing an enlightened being or an arahant, because having an arahant or an enlightened being in the world is one of the best things that could happen, because now this individual can help others to understand what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. And having gotten to the first stage of enlightenment and even experiencing those significantly improved qualities that aren't yet enlightenment, you will know that, oh my goodness, this is so great. And your mind's not even enlightened yet, but you're experiencing these improved qualities. You would not be interested in killing an arahant at all. And then the same thing is true about a Buddha or a Tathagata, that you would know how important it is to have a Buddha in the world. And if you live during the lifetime of a Buddha, this is the very best time to actually live, because you can actually make your way to enlightenment, because the wisdom of a Buddha is going to be very deep and very profound. So you would be incapable of shedding a Tathagata's blood with a mind of hatred. So you wouldn't be capable of harming a Buddha. And then the 5th one here for the 5 heinous crimes is creating division in the community. That by the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have seen that significant progress to the condition of the mind, and you will know that it's the community that's helped you to be able to accomplish that. So you would be incapable of going around and, gossiping and trying to turn people on each other and trying to create division and separation in this particular community, because you'll know how important this community is for you to be able to learn and grow and develop and be able to make your way to enlightenment. Without this community, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So you'd be incapable of creating this division in the community. So that's what's referred to in that previous discourse. It's oftentimes referred to as the 5 heinous crimes. But then there's the 6th one here, incapable of acknowledging another teacher. What this is referring to is, once again, by the time you've gotten to accomplishment in view in that first stage of enlightenment, you've seen significant improvement to the condition of the mind. And you will know that it's that particular teacher that's helped you to be able to get to that mental state. And you'd be incapable of acknowledging another person on this path as being your teacher, because you'll know that it's not those people's teachings that are leading to the improved condition of your mind. It's this particular individual that's helped you to be able to get to that. So you'll get to a point where you'll know that it's this particular teacher that's helping you, and you'll be dedicated and consistent with learning and growing with that particular person, because you'll have seen the improvement to the condition of your mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Looks like we have our same rotation here, just a little out of order. We got Vibhav and Janae with questions. Go ahead, guys.
So I had a question about the 3 and 4. So you said before that by the time somebody reaches arhanship, that they have extinguished their northern karma, and they will not experience any more karma that is will come to harm them. But we do know that Buddha had some people, like, and he had arch nemesis Devdutt, who was trying to take his life as well. And I'm assuming this is one of the reasons why this is in here, that there were some people trying to cause harm to him. I mean, of course, they did not succeed. So I was wondering how that, if he had already extinguished all his unwholesome karma, and there should not have been anybody trying to harm him, right?
So this isn't in here because the Buddha is trying to stop people from harming these people. It's not like a rule or commandment. It's just what the mind is practicing, because it's a result of having developed to a certain point. The Buddha did have all wholesome karma by the time he got to enlightenment. So that's why, even though those people tried to kill him, they weren't able to, right? So there was a story of an individual who tried to push a rock off of a cliff and it didn't hit the Buddha. There was the person who was chasing after him with a sword, but none of these people even, pierced his skin or even rose a sweat on the Buddha. So even though those people were trying to do things, it never actually impacted him. So he didn't experience any unwholesome karma. Just the fact that somebody's trying to kill you doesn't mean that that's unwholesome karma. It's if they actually did kill you, this would be unwholesome karma. So an individual who is gotten to enlightenment, they wouldn't have people who are interested in trying to kill them. But let's just look at this from today's perspective. Let's just say that there was actual Buddha in the world, and let's just say that somehow large groups of people started understanding that this person was in the world and they were a Buddha. And now there's 8 billion people in the world. That person's life, who is an actual Buddha, their day-to-day life, there's not anybody in their life that's interested in killing them. But let's just say this hits the airwaves and hits the news, and now far and wide, people understand that this individual is a Buddha. Well, there could be somebody off in some far distant land that hears about this, has unwholesome things in their mind, working on behalf of Mara, and now they might try to come and kill that individual, the person who is a Buddha. And it's not because this person, this Buddha, made any unwise choices. It's because this news spread based on other people's choices. And now this individual might be coming to try to kill the individual who would be considered a Buddha. So it's not just the fact that someone's trying to kill you, it's that they actually did kill you. And even in this situation, you can see where it wasn't the choices and decisions of the actual Buddha that led to somebody wanting to come and try to kill him. In this example of modern day life, it was the news that was spread. But if that news never spread, that individual who's a Buddha in their day-to-day life, there's nobody that's going to try to kill that individual or actually be able to kill that individual, because they're not making decisions that are going to lead to that. But in the lifetime of the Buddha, there were still these individuals that had anger and hatred in their mind, and they were trying to kill him, but they didn't actually succeed because of his wholesome karma. He doesn't have any unwholesome karma.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's see. We have a question, I think, coming in here on Zoom, or I'm sorry, on YouTube. So is the mind that's making the decisions what's eternal inside of us and everything else is temporary? No, this isn't true, that the mind isn't eternal. This is something that is a misunderstanding in the world, that some people think that there's something that is eternal. When we talk, and where this is typically coming from, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that oftentimes when people hear the cycle of rebirth, they think that the mind is permanent, and now that is moving from life to life to life. Because some people teach this, but that's not what the Buddha taught. If you look at what the Buddha taught, he taught that the mind is impermanent. I've even seen ordained Buddhist monks here in Thailand teach that the mind is permanent. And that's because of a misunderstanding of this word samsara. This word samsara has been translated as the cycle of rebirth for a really long time. But the way that I would translate that is the cycle of new existence. Because if you look at the way that the Buddha talks about the samsara, is he talks about it being a new being every single time. It's a new body and it's a new mind every single time. The mind is not eternal. It's not moving from life to life to life, that it's actually impermanent. So there isn't anything as part of this body or this mind that is permanent. Once the mind gets to enlightenment, that is a permanent mental state, but the mind itself is impermanent. Okay. Looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So in like all of these, it keeps saying incapable. And I was wondering if that means that you've gotten to a certain point of flawlessness in your practice to where you wouldn't even be able to do it as like a mistake.
That's true.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. This is chapter 27, more cases of incapability. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, looks like Leo and then Vibhava after that.
Thank you. 6 cases of incapability by one accomplished in view. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. But 6. 1 accomplished in view is, first, incapable of resorting to pleasure and pain are made by oneself. Second, capable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by another. Incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are both made by oneself and made by another. Or incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are not made by oneself, but have arisen by accident or chance. 5. Incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are not made by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. 6. Incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made neither by oneself or by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. These are the 6 cases of incapability. For what reason? Because the person accomplished in view has clearly seen causation and causally arisen objects. These are the 6 cases of incapability.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So here, this is essentially referring to someone who's deeply penetrated the Four Noble Truths. That if you've understood the Four Noble Truths and that it's craving, desire, attachment that is causing discontentedness, you would be incapable of resorting to the view of any of these things. That you'd be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure or pain are made by oneself, because you'll know that there is no self, that it's craving, desire, attachment that is causing the conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. It's not oneself, it's craving, desire, attachment in the mind that's causing this. You'll also be incapable of resorting to the view that these conditioned feelings are being caused by another person. This is something that is oftentimes the case in the unenlightened state with a lack of wisdom. You might think your mom or dad are causing you to be angry or frustrated or irritated and all these other things, or your brothers and sisters or your boss or your coworkers or your neighbors, but you'd be incapable of resorting to that if you've penetrated the Four Noble Truths and you understood craving, desire, attachment. You'd be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are both made by oneself and by another. You'd be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are not made by oneself, but have arisen by accident or chance. Because you'll know it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing it. You'll be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by another, are not made by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. Incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made neither by oneself nor by another, but have arisen by accident or chance. Because you know it's craving, desire, attachment. And that's what the Buddha is saying down here, is that you've clearly seen this causation, meaning the natural law of karma, that when you're making decisions based on craving, anger, and ignorance, it leads to unwholesome karma. The unwholesomeness, part of that unwholesome karma is the discontentedness itself. And you would have clearly seen causally arisen objects, meaning you clearly understand dependent origination, and you'll understand all those interlinking steps that is leading to your discontentedness. So you'll know that it's none of these things that the Buddha is talking about here, but instead it's the craving, desire, attachment, and namely it's ignorance that's leading to all these things. So this is somebody who's accomplished in view, will have understood these things and be incapable of resorting to this kind of thinking, because they would have seen the truth for themselves and penetrated it with wisdom. Okay, so we've got our rotation up. It looks like Vibhav, do you have a question? Or is that for reading?
That was for reading, sir.
Okay, so it looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So I'm just very confused by this entire thing. Like, I don't understand it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you like summarize it or something?
Yeah, essentially what this is that someone is accomplished in view, they would understand the Four Noble Truths, and they would understand the universal truth of non-self, that it's not the self, and it's not other people, and it's not just by accident or chance that you're experiencing discontentedness, it's because of craving, desire, attachment. And you would need to be able to see that very clearly, that that's what's causing your discontentedness. It's not none of these things.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see if we have anything on Facebook or YouTube. Okay, I don't see anything there. So it looks like Vibhav, you're up for this next one. And this one is the Eightfold Path. I usually don't read this as part of the Pali Canon English study group because I teach it in all the foundational classes. And I'm teaching this tomorrow in the group learning program. As part of that on Sunday, 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., I'm going to walk students through this piece by piece because it takes about 2.5 hours to really teach this thoroughly. So if you guys have any questions on this is what I usually do in the Pali Canon program, is when we get to the Eightfold Path to just say, what questions do you guys have? Because you need to dial this in really closely in order to be able to get to the jhanas and the first stage of enlightenment. That's why it's in this particular book. So let me know if you guys have any questions on the Eightfold Path. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll move on to chapter 29. Getting to that. Here we go. All right, Vibhav, you're up.
Thank you. How a stream enterer is God. Monks, when a noble disciple thus understands, as they really are, the cause and the passing away of the world, he is then God. A noble disciple who is accomplished in view, who is accomplished in vision, who has arrived at these true teachings, who sees his true teachings, who possesses a trainee's wisdom, who possesses a trainee's true wisdom, who has entered the stream of his teachings, a noble one with penetrative wisdom, one who stands squarely before the door to the deathless enlightenment.
Okay, so this is the description of what the Buddha is saying a stream enterer can be described as. This is how you would describe a stream enterer. Right. And there's other ways that we can add into this based on what the Buddha taught, but this is like a summary of how to describe a stream enterer. And he says one who's understood the cause and passing away of the world, meaning they've understood the natural laws of existence to a certain degree. That's what he's actually teaching, is these natural laws. And that's what he means by the cause and passing away of the world, that you've understood how the world functions. And that's what you're working to accomplish in order to be able to get to enlightenment and cultivation of that wisdom. And then having done so, this is how one would be explained or described in terms of a summary version. So any questions here?
I had a technical question more. So in the case of when they say the door to the deathless, I was wondering why it should be more like the door to the birthless, because you're not having another birth, because you extinguish the existence. So I was wondering why it's called deathless and not like birthless.
The deathless is because once you get to enlightenment, you're not experiencing any death from that point forward. Because when you are enlightened and you get to the end of this life, it's what's called final enlightenment, that an individual's body and mind are separating, but now this is the actual being experiencing final enlightenment, where you won't experience any physical pain any longer from that point forward. So that's why the Buddha refers to it as the deathless, because the individual isn't actually dying, they're just experiencing final enlightenment. Okay, so we have a question here on Facebook from Mayu Lee. She says, "Teacher, when the Buddha said incapable of acknowledging another teacher, did he mean teachers that doesn't teach the words of the Buddha? Can we learn from more than one teacher that teaches the words of the Buddha? For the majority, I am learning from you, but I'm also learning from the monk Prajang Krukrit." So the answer is, yeah, that you wouldn't be able to acknowledge a teacher outside of this tradition. That if you've been learning with a particular teacher and you've been able to see very clearly that this particular teacher has helped you get to a particular development on the path to enlightenment, you'd be incapable of learning with another teacher. It's very rare that people do what you're doing because, yeah, he teaches in Thai and you know Thai, so you learn with him in Thai and you learn with me in English. And I think one of the main reasons why you learn with Prajang Krukrit is because you can learn in Thai and then you can talk with your mom and you can help her in Thai using the Thai words, where if you were only learning with me, you wouldn't actually be able to help your mom. So that's a pretty rare thing that people are doing it that way. Typically, you're learning with a particular teacher, and that particular teacher, you'll know, has helped you to be able to get to that significant improvement in the condition of your mind. And that's why the Buddha says you're being capable of acknowledging another teacher. But what you're doing is something a bit different than that. And you're learning in Thai because you're looking to help your mom with that. Okay, not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's go to the last question, or I'm sorry, the last chapter for today, which is chapter 30. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
The 10 feathers, monks. There are these 10 feathers. What 10? The 5 lower feathers and the 5 higher feathers. And what are the 5 lower feathers? 1. Personal existence will. 2. Doubt. 3. Wrong behavior and observances. 4. Sensual desire. And 5. Ill will. These are the 5 lower feathers. And what are the 5 higher feathers? 6. Desire for form. 7. Desire for formless. 8. Conceit. 9. Restlessness. And 10. Ignorance. These are the 5 higher feathers. These monks are the 10 feathers. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So the 10 fetters are the 10 pollutions in the mind that are hindering it from experiencing the enlightened mental state. And it's referred to as a fetter because of the shackle and chain and a ball that was used during the lifetime of the Buddha to keep a prisoner trapped in a certain area. That was called a fetter, and that would keep you kind of confined to a certain area. So when the Buddha discovered these pollutions of mind, he described them as fetters. And here he's just listing out what these 10 fetters are. And they're in this particular book because by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you really need to be focusing on the 10 fetters at that point. You already got the Eightfold Path well underway. You've got the natural law of Gama. You've got accomplishment in view. You've got the 5 aggregates, the 6 sense bases, dependent origination. You've got all these teachings, meditation practice, the 5 precepts. All these teachings have been well developed in the mind. Now you've got all that stuff. Now what's left is getting rid of these pollutions. And you've already been working on this up to this point. That's the whole reason why you're experiencing any particular benefit, that you would already have been using things like the Eightfold Path and the other teachings to wear these away. And by the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you've already eliminated personal existence view, doubts, and wrong behavior and observances. But now you need to really focus on the 10 fetters. And that's why I have that retreat in August where I teach an hour to an hour and a half on each one of these fetters. I explain to you what it is, the symptoms of it, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. So here, these are the 10 fetters. The Buddha's just listing them out for you, but you need much more detail than just this. So that's why you have a teacher to be able to help you to learn what these are and how to actually eliminate them. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Looks like Samantha has a question.
Yes, I have a couple about the 10 fetters. The first one is, why is there a differentiation between higher and lower? Does that mean that the lower ones are easier to conquer or more difficult? And are they building blocks to the ones that follow? And
can I answer that one first?
I'll start with that.
Yeah, sure. So I don't exactly know why he refers to them as higher or lower, just because they all need to be eliminated. But having gotten to the first, second, or third stage of enlightenment, those are the 5 lower fetters, having gotten rid of those. And it's getting to this heightened mental state of enlightenment where you need to also eliminate the higher fetters. And it's not that they're necessarily more difficult or more challenging. I think for most people, they probably consider the lower fetters to actually be more challenging, but I don't think that he named them the lower fetters because of that. But the only reason why the lower fetters, in my opinion, are more challenging is because your mind isn't as developed, because you're still not necessarily early in practice, but you're earlier in practice. Your mind is still being developed. You don't have your full development of your mind yet, and you're still working through those lower fetters, and they're quite challenging to work through those lower fetters. The higher fetters, in my opinion, aren't as challenging to eliminate. The conceit can be quite challenging for people. That's a multi-year pursuit. These first two in the higher fetters, those aren't necessarily so challenging. Some people even eliminate those before they're even in the first stage of enlightenment. They don't even have desire for form in the desire for formless. So they're not even eliminated in this order necessarily. Because some people can eliminate these two even before the first stage of enlightenment. But conceit can be a challenging one. Restlessness, this one can still be there, just kind of a light level of overactivity in the mind. And then this ignorance is always the last one to eliminate from the mind, because if the mind is in anything other than enlightenment, there's still ignorance in the mind. So even in that third stage of enlightenment, there's still ignorance. So that's why the Buddha put this one as last, because that's the last one to go from the mind. And that's where the mind is now enlightened. So why they're higher and lower, it's just referring to the first, second, and third stage of enlightenment is the lower fetters. And then the higher fetters, that's what's going to get you to that higher consciousness, that enlightened mental state where the mind's actually enlightened. Okay, so
okay, I think that helped me, because I thought perhaps they were building blocks. Once you conquered one, then the next one, and the next one, because for desire for form and formlessness, I feel like that's kind of a non-issue for me. And then I wondered if perhaps I didn't understand those two fetters, because I thought, okay, well, if they're in that particular order, they must be maybe more difficult to conquer. But you're saying not necessarily. So that answered my second question then. Thank you.
Yeah, and they are actually kind of like building blocks the way you describe it, even though they're not always eliminated in this order. Having eliminated personal existence view, for example, you will then be able to eliminate your conceit. You wouldn't be able to eliminate conceit without having eliminated personal existence view, right? And then things like, wrong behavior and observances, you wouldn't have been able to eliminate the conceit without having done that. So this is kind of almost like a personal growth plan where you are using it to kind of help you to grow and kind of know what to focus on next, but they don't necessarily always get eliminated in this particular order in the way that the Buddha is describing here. So that's something to keep in mind too about these fetters.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Janae, you have a question?
So is it true that in the first stage of enlightenment, you can still have ill will and sensual desire?
Yes, you will still have sensual desire and ill will in that first stage of enlightenment. This is why a person in the first stage of enlightenment will still, have certain cravings. They'll still have frustration and agitation and annoyance. They won't have that big rage that you had previously when you're off the path to enlightenment, but you still have sensual desire and ill will there. But it's even though it's not greatly thinned like it is in the second stage of enlightenment, it is thinning out. But it's just not greatly thinned at that point. And that's why, like, members of the community that you're part of, you won't have any anger and hatred and resentment and bitterness towards them, but there will be other people in your life that you'll have that towards, even in that first stage of enlightenment. But then when you get to the second stage of enlightenment, that's where it's been greatly thinned. And then by the third stage, sensual desire and ill will be completely eliminated.
Okay, so like what are like examples of it being greatly thinned? Like with ill will, if you have like a slight dislike towards someone, would that be like greatly thinned, or would that be different?
Exactly. That's what greatly thinned is that you don't have, intense rage or anger. You don't even have like deep frustration and agitation by the time it's been greatly thinned. You just have like, kind of like a little annoyance or a little agitation or, dislike towards others. You can have that when the fetter of ill will is greatly thinned. It's barely even there. It's there, but it's barely even there. And it's very short lived when you have it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, looks like Vibhav, you're next.
Thank you. So on the desire for form, is it also important to eliminate the fear of death?
Yes.
Or is it just I don't want to be born as don't get to be born as a human?
Yes, that's what I share in the first book, is that by the time somebody eliminates desire for form, they will no longer have fear of death, because it's holding on to this physical form that the mind oftentimes is fearing death. It can also be that they're fearing the pain as a result of getting closer and closer to death. But by the time somebody eliminates desire for form, they won't have a fear of death any longer. You'll see that in Volume 1, Chapter 3.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, looks like Leo has a question.
Yeah, David, I wanted to ask you just a small question, maybe after class, about downloading pages. If you maybe have a 1 minute or something.
Sure. Yeah, I'll stick around after class. We can chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Looks like we have a question here from Tonka. Tonka saying, pleasure and pain are still experienced if someone eliminates cravings, as long as we have this body and mind in this existence. Is that correct? We don't attach to them, but they are experienced. So it's important that we separate the physical pain from the mental pain. That an individual who's eliminated sensual desire and doesn't have any cravings any longer, they won't experience any mental anguish in terms of based on sensual desire. If someone still has desire for form or desire for formless, there's still some cravings in the mind. But let's just say all cravings are extinguished. That individual isn't going to experience any mental anguish whatsoever. But they're still going to experience some muted physical pain. Like if you stump your toe, you're still going to know you stumped your toe. Or if you're standing too close to a fire, you're still going to know that that's pretty hot. But there's no mental anguish along with it. So that particular mental anguish has been eliminated, but there's still going to be some muted physical pain, but you're going to experience this very differently than you experienced pain in the past. And same thing is that once you get rid of craving, desire, attachment, you're not experiencing conditional pleasant feelings any longer, but you are enjoying every single aspect of your life. You're having unconditional happiness and unconditioned joy. And we might even call that pleasure, that you're experiencing nothing but pleasure, but it's unconditioned. So when we talk about the elimination of pleasure and pain, or getting beyond pleasure and pain, what we're talking about is conditional experiences that are producing that. But even as an enlightened being, you're going to experience some physical pain, but it's very muted and very minor. Is what you're experiencing. You can even experience a cracked rib, for example, and still be smiling and joyful and laughing, where other people are like, whoa, this person has a cracked rib. Like, what's going on with this person, right? Where that person could actually continue to be joyful and smiling in that situation. So I think this helps you. It's not that you don't attach to these things. It's that you just don't experience them. You just don't experience those conditional feelings in the mind, but there is still going to be some physical pain. And you need that because as an enlightened being, if you were standing too close to a fire, you need to know like, oh, there's a fire there. Let me step away. Whereas if you didn't experience that little bit of muted physical pain, you would just continue to stand there and you would end up damaging this physical body. So you need that little bit of physical pain while you're in this life, but you're not going to have the mental anguish along with it. Okay, it looks like Mayuli is saying, just want to add that I know without a doubt that because of learning from you, I'm seeing huge improvements in my life. Thank you, teacher. Oh, you're welcome, Mayuli. Pleased to help you and everyone else who has a sincere interest in learning and practicing these teachings. They definitely lead to where the Buddha said they'd lead to. So looks like that's everything for today. We're going to be picking up next week right where we left off. We're going to be doing chapters 31 through 40. So if you guys would like to learn these ahead of time, you can actually be learning in the books by reading the words of the Buddha. You have the reference there, and then you have the words from me to be able to help you to be able to learn these. And you can read before class or after class or before and after class. This is only going to help you. And then when you come to class, you can get any clarification that you need in order to help you in your day-to-day practice and developing that practice. So that's what we're going to be doing next week in this particular class. Tomorrow, we're going to be in our group learning program in Volume 1, where you're going to be able to learn the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha that you need to know inside and out, backwards and forwards. So even for some of you guys that have learned this before, it could potentially be a good refresher for you if you think you need a bit of a refresher on that particular topic. And remember, I teach that at 9 a.m. Thai time and 9 p.m., and that's live streamed both times. So you can either attend live or you can watch the recordings if you need to do that, because you're going to need to dial that in closer and closer. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing meditation at the temple and opening up to any and all questions that you like. And then in the evening, I'm going to be teaching the second part of a 4-part series on Buddhist chanting, if you'd like to learn and practice your Buddhist chanting. So thank you all so much for learning and growing and developing. Enjoy the holidays and everything that the holidays bring. And perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.